This is going to be sort of interesting because really what I'm talking about is basically how I try to stay creative, and maybe you can learn some lessons from it. I don't know. Everybody's a little bit different. But the reason I want to even talk about this is because creative people are my favorite people. There's a TED Talk which talks about how when kids go into kindergarten, 5 years old, they're interviewed, and every single one of them says they're an artist. And by the time they graduate high school, by the time they're 18, it's something like 2% say that they're artists. So what's interesting is what happens, what did we do as a society in that 16, 12-year period of educating kids that just beat it out of them, that they all thought they were artists and now they're not artists anymore. And I just think it's a shame because there's only two types of people in the world, in my opinion. There's creative people and there's exploitive people. And now hang on. And by the way, please, it'll be so encouraging to me if you laugh. If you think I'm trying to be funny, then just laugh, even if it doesn't seem funny. It just helps me out. So the reason is, go back in time to the blues musician standing on the corner, just playing his heart out, and then some smart guy comes up and says, "Hey, I'm going to record you. I'll give you a ham sandwich if you let me record you." So those are the two people. There's the musician, the creative guy, and there's the exploiter, the guy with the ham sandwich. But it is possible for creative people to learn more about the exploiting type, because that's what we all should learn. Because every one of us in this room, probably, except for the publisher types, started off creative and resisted every time one of the adults in the room said, "You'll never make a living doing that," whatever it is, drawing monsters, playing games, playing music, dancing, whatever it is. It's like, you'll never make a living doing that, and it beats the creativity out of people. And the corporate world also beats creativity out of people. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background, and also I think you'll see that I tend to improvise when I'm speaking. So that's just my style, and it's the way I stay creative. My mother was a piano teacher. My father was a film director, so I grew up in a household that valued creativity. And the reason I have this slide up right now is this is my view from my deck at my house. That's Puget Sound. That's Whidbey Island. And we just bought this place. And I took this picture just last week, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool. So it helps me to stay grounded. So once I got a music degree from a conservatory in the Midwest, and then I went and got a Master's of Music Composition degree from University of Southern California. I moved back to Chicago, and I was thinking I was going to teach music at a conservatory in Chicago. And in the intervening summer, before the job that I was going to get fell through completely, I was doing work as a grip on a set. And the producer came to me. This is a true story. I just was fresh out of a master's degree program. And the producer came to me and she said, "Hey, Marty, you've got a degree in music. Why don't you write music for the film that we're shooting right now?" And I was like, "Well, because I don't want to prostitute my art." So I'm not kidding. Those words actually came out of my mouth. And I really believed that at that moment. And the funny thing is, well, that's funny in and of itself, but the really funny thing is the very next day, the director of the movie came to me, and it was a short movie. Oh, by the way, this is not a great movie. This was like it's an industrial project. It was a point-of-purchase film for Sears power saws or something. It was bizarre. But he said, "Hey, Marty, I'll give you $500 to score this film." And I was like, "Okay." So what it turned out was no one had actually offered me money before. And so as someone who prostituted their art, I just didn't know what my price was. Unfortunately, it turns out that $500 is not really my price because I had no equipment and no studio, so I had to go to my friend Mike Salvatore, who was, had been in a rival band. And I said, Mike, I'll split this money with you if you help me do this gig. And we've been partners ever since, so that's pretty amazing. And then, of course, we had to split it again because the government asks for taxes. So suddenly, I got 1/3 of the $500, and that was what my price was. So here's the theme of what we're going to talk about. I want you to read this, and when you get it, laugh. So this is the business we're in. When worlds collide, there's the exploitive guy, and there's the creative guy. And the creatives have to depend on the exploiters, and the exploiters really, really want what this musician is able to provide, what the creative person can provide. They really, really need that. But as you can tell, sometimes you get asked to do something like this, mention ball bearings. And this is very close to reality. I actually had to do, my first career was doing jingles, film scores, and then a bunch of commercial jingles. Do you call them jingles over here? Yeah, okay. Over here, yeah. You guys are from every place, right? So anyway, one of the jingles I did was for a insurance financial group. It was called the Principal Financial Group. And I went to the meeting, and they actually said to me, well, you need to sing a song. You need to write a song that actually has the word principal in it 7 times in 30 seconds. Now, I wish I could play it for you right now. It's not that thrilling, but we actually did it. It was on the air. It was actually a success. But it was like really, principal. We're going to say that. It's just not even a good sound to sing, and we had to do it 7 times. So anyway, this is the state we're all in. So this is me now. I'm going to go into this very soon. I'll start the actual talk. This is what helps me stay creative now. That's my piano, and that's the view I have out the Puget Sound. So I just want you to know that that's one way of helping me to stay creative. All right. So here's what I hope. I hope that as you take something away from this little talk, because I'm going to go all over the place, and I hope that you'll just remember one little set of things at some point when you're down and you feel like there's nothing to do, there's no way to be creative. You're going to figure out a way to do it. So I have 3 points I'm going to give you right now, 3 principles about staying creative. And the first one is to stay alive. And this seems really obvious. Obviously, you can't be creative if you're dead. But as you've heard other people say, in the game business, we have this thing called crunch, which is just absolutely atrocious. Now, there are similar crunches in just about every entertainment industry, but I swear the game industry is just brutal. And I've seen relationships break up. I've seen people literally go insane. And I'm not kidding. That actually happens. Because of crunch, because of the pressures of crunch, and it's just ridiculous. So I encourage everybody to realize there is no game that's more important than your life. There is no project that's more important than your life and your relationships. So stay alive, stay healthy, and ship. Now, this might be a question. Why is shipping important to staying creative? And the reason it's important is because if you're making stuff and you never actually share it with anybody, then you are starting to become a perfectionist. And a perfectionist isn't creative because they can just never let go. And it's so much better. And I really think, somebody asked me one time, like, what's my biggest inspiration? And I say deadlines. And the reason deadlines are so important is because I would be probably one of those people that's too lazy to do anything unless I had a deadline, or I would be too much of a perfectionist unless I was forced to let go of something. And the best way to learn how to be creative and stay creative is to make sure you're sharing your stuff as often as you can. So shipping is really important. And then the third is make money. So you can't make money if you're dead, so that makes sense. And of course, if you're making money, you can eat, which helps you to stay alive. So all these things, see how they all work together? Okay. Now, the reason I think making money is important is, keep laughing, that's good. the reason making money is important is because it is a feedback loop. It is something that tells you how you're actually doing as a creative person. Now, this probably sounds antithetical to what I was saying before, but it's really, really good information. If you're sharing your creativity with other people and they actually think it's valuable, that's really good. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. Van Gogh never sold a painting while he was alive, but I wouldn't wish that life on anybody in this room. I think it was probably a really rotten life that he had, and it's sort of sad. Now, maybe he would have sold something if he just had a better brother. His brother was supposedly his, exploitive manager guy, but he really screwed up. I mean, he should have sold at least one painting. So anyway, just make sure that you're making money, because then it teaches you a lesson on. And here's the thing: it's not like the people who make the most money at being creative are the best creatives, but it does teach you as a person who's trying to be creative that you're on the right track. So it's not about the amount, it's just at least something. All right, who's this guy? See, I told you I was going to go all over the place. See, are you following this? No, it's impossible. But anybody know who this guy is? An American in the audience know who it is? Oh, that's so sad. This man is Ray Kroc. He invented McDonald's, one of the biggest corporations in the entire world. McDonald's was a company that was based in the Chicago area, and we did tons of commercials for McDonald's. We did film scores for McDonald's. I did a version of Michael Jackson's Beat It for a training video for employees called Clean It. It was genius. It was wonderful. Anyway, we all had to work for somebody at McDonald's at some point. And one of the things that actually stuck with me when I did the hour-long biography documentary on Ray Kroc, yes, was one of the things he said that actually stuck with me was that he was the first person to take the hamburger seriously. Okay? And here's how this applies to us. Like, we should take what we do really seriously. We make games, but take it seriously, because if you take it seriously, you're going to be successful. But the flip side to that is, of course, we were working on a McDonald's video that was late, and the director was working, and finally the director just threw up his hands and he just said, "It's just a fucking hamburger." So, like, the perspective of games are, hey, you're in a business that you get to make games for a living. You're not curing cancer. You're not solving world peace. But, this is really cool. You're doing something you can take seriously, but don't take it too seriously. That makes a ton of sense. Just remember that. This reminds me of a story. Everything reminds me of some story, but this one reminds me of a story of Steve Ballmer, who is, I think, was he the former? He's no longer, what does he do at Microsoft now? He's former. Is he gone? That's a shame. Steve Ballmer came to MGS one time. Now, Bungie had been bought by Microsoft, and Steve came to talk to a whole group of people about making games. And he's asked if anybody had questions, and I had a question, and I said, Steve, Microsoft is a great software company. Now that you have Microsoft Game Studios and you have the Xbox, how are you going to make sure that it's a great entertainment company? And he thought about that for a minute, and he goes, well, I think what you really mean to ask is, that's a good start. What you really mean to ask is, how are we going to make Microsoft a great entertainment software company? And then he went on to talk about that. And I was already checked out because that wasn't my question at all. We don't make entertainment software. We use software. We use entertainment software to help us make entertainment. So just remember that. As a creative person, you are making entertainment, whatever it is. Playing games is something that people do with their spare time. And they could be watching a movie or a TV show or going out and playing on the lawn. But instead, they're playing your game for some amount of time. It's what they do with their spare time, and that's what we're all fighting for, and it's entertainment. So just remember that you're making entertainment, and software is just a tool. So here we are again, staying creative in the entertainment industry. I have a couple more principles here. And the first one is something I've heard a couple of people talk about already today, and that is a vision. Make sure you still have a unique vision, a vision that only you have. Now, don't get too balled up in being completely unique. Like, that's impossible. The guy just before me was talking about this, and I completely agree. You're in culture. We're all inundated by things we love, games we play, things we watch. You can't be not influenced by culture. But if you find yourself just copying culture, that is not creativity, that's just parroting. So at some point you want to know that you have a unique vision, something that you're passionate about, and you just hold on to that. And then another thing is, and this is what I think is probably the key to this whole talk, is I'm going to talk about collaboration. And creative collaboration is hugely, hugely important. And what that means, of course, is, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The whole idea that what you do with somebody else should be better than what you would be doing by yourself. If you could do it better by yourself, just do it by yourself. But in this industry, you have to be able to collaborate and do something. The magic sauce happens in the collaboration. And the third thing is staying fresh. So this is a tough one. When I first started doing commercials, it couldn't have been a more thrilling thing for me to actually write a little piece of music, and then on the weekend, I remember the first commercial I did. I went home and watched the Chicago Bears play football, and right in the middle of the game, my commercial came on, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. My music is playing on the television that I'm watching. That just seems so cool. So fast forward a few years, and I'm with my partner Mike, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're arguing about how to score this commercial we're working on. And it was a claymation cat. Very cool looking claymation cat, and it was doing this little move, and I was trying to score it in a way that was cool. Mike didn't like what I was doing. We were arguing about it. But we were really intense because the client was coming the next day, and we really wanted to nail this thing. For kitty litter. Claymation cat, kitty litter, you get how that all sort of connects. And I had this epiphany. Suddenly I'm like, what am I doing? This isn't fun anymore. I don't want to do kitty litter commercials and children's vitamins commercials and McDonald's hamburgers commercials. I mean, there was a point where that sounded really, really cool, and it was for a long time. But I felt like I needed something that was going to help me stay more fresh, and I felt like I had just sort of lost my purpose. And it still took me a while to move on, but I eventually did. So my creative history, we'll start with some jingles. Now, some of you who are from America know a jingle I did, the Flintstones vitamins commercial, but most of you here probably don't know what that is. And for those of you who are from England, it has nothing to do with the Milky Boy kid. It's Flintstones kids. Does anybody know Milky Boy kid? All right. Nobody, even you don't. Oh, somebody does. Okay, good. Anyway, it's a jingle that I could play right now, but it's just not that impressive. So I'm going to play this other jingle that we did early in our career. This is for, well, you'll hear it.
Poppin' rocks, candy dent, pop out a smile. Fruit and mint flavors, sugarless style.
Announcer here. Rocks candy dent, blah, blah, blah.
Poppin' rocks, candy dent, pop out a smile. America's wearing the candy dent smile.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a product that's destined to be around a long time, Candy Dent. Who even came up with that idea? Anyway, so that was probably one of the most jingly jingles I ever did. And the surprising thing is that wasn't the one it was the kitty litter thing years later that got me to finally go, what am I doing? How did that not make me wonder what I was doing? I don't know. But one thing I learned by doing jingles is that the idea that that things can stick in people's heads, that a good hook is always going to be something that's useful. and also just sharing ideas with people you trust. And this is part of this collaboration thing I'm going to talk about. Years later, I'm working. Well, I'll back up real quick. When I decided to get into games, it was because I met this kid who came to my commercial studio. He was 18. His name was Josh Staub. And he said he had friends who made computer games, and he saw that I had Crazy Taxi and Uninvited or something on my shelf. And he says, "Do you like computer games?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I love computer games." He says, "Well, my friends make computer games." I'm like, "That's interesting. You're 18. What could that be?" And so he brought over this beta version of a game that night to my house, and it was Myst. And no one had seen Myst yet, so I got to see this beta version, and I put it on my CD-ROM drive. I actually had one at my house, which was really unusual. And the thing came on, and I was like, oh my gosh, somebody is finally doing something that is attractive to me as an audio music person. It was a completely unique approach to audio and music for games, and Myst was seminal in that area. And I had tons of people who, in my side of the industry, who just loved what those guys did. So I made it my mission from that point on. I'm like, that's the industry I want to see if I can move into. This is 1993. So it took me a while to finally even meet these guys, but I worked with Cyan, and by 96, I was working on Riven, the sequel to Myst. So that was the first game I did, was Riven. If anybody played Riven, you can play it on your iPad now, so it's like $2 or something. At the same time I was working on Riven, there was a company in Chicago that was making video games called Bungie, and I thought, well, I should test the local talent and see how they are. So I got a job with them, and I did Myth: The Fallen Lords in 97, and I was working with them. And by 99, we were going to do a demo at Macworld with Steve Jobs, and we needed something really spectacular, and it was such a last-minute thing. But I told the guys, let me come up with something, and I'll do music for you, and maybe this will be cool. And then I was driving over to Mike's studio, and I had this idea, well, if it's going to sound ancient, which is one of the things we wanted it to sound. I thought monks doing Gregorian chant sounds ancient. Even though this is a space first-person shooter, thinking about Gregorian chant monks seemed a little bit off. But I thought I would test it with Mike. Luckily, I didn't test it with any of the guys at Bungie, because if I had said that to the guys at Bungie, they would have said, no, you're an idiot, that's stupid. But when you are collaborating with somebody you trust, you can just say some of these ideas, like, what do you think? And I sang this melody to Mike, and Mike's like, yeah, that's cool, let's do it. So this is essentially the jingle that you know. So the interesting thing about that is it's me and Mike and 3 other jingle singers. That's who's singing it. Guys who had sung Mr. Clean commercials for me, so that was fun. I sang Mr. Clean commercials, believe it or not. The other interesting thing is as I even now listen to that, I think space and Halo, and it sounds like Halo. It sounds like Halo, right? When I did it, it didn't sound like Halo. Nobody associated monks with Halo. It's like that was a conscious choice that just turned out to work out pretty good. But I knew that if we had something hooky and unusual that people weren't expecting, we could build on that. So that's about being fresh. So now after, 17 years in the game business, and we did many Halos who was the guy who talked at 1 o'clock? What was his name? Steve? That was amazing. I've never seen him before. That was just amazing. But he blamed Halo for killing the game industry. So I was like, yeah, okay. But he made up for it because he blamed everybody. So that's fine. But after 17 years in games and doing 10 years of Halo, it started to not be fresh anymore. So it was a good thing when Bungie, number one, we got out of Microsoft, which is great. I love Microsoft. They helped kill the game industry. I don't know if you noticed that. But so did Activision, so there you go. Then I had a friend who has gotten me connections with these kind of actors, and he knew that we were starting something new and needed to like regenerate some creativity. And he said, how about working with Sir Paul? So we got to work with Paul McCartney. And the cool thing about Paul McCartney, like, by the way, when this guy said this to me, his name is Lev Chapelski. He runs a place called Blind Light. Has anybody worked with Blind Light in the room? Anybody? Yeah, you have, of course. Anyway, he can get you anybody, apparently. I mean, when he said that would you like to work with Paul McCartney, I'm like, well, yeah, but that's really dumb. He's never going to work with me. And for some reason, he decided he would, which is cool because Paul is one of these guys, Sir Paul, sorry, who he just never wants to stop. He never wants to stop creating in new ways. I mean, think of the success he's had. He doesn't ever have to do anything ever again. And instead, he's like out there doing ballets and oratorios. And of course, he's still touring and doing incredible stuff. But he wanted to know what it was like to do music, in adaptive music for a game. And so he worked with us, and it was a blast. We got to work. This is a shot of us working in a studio in New York. And the guy sitting next to, this is me and that's Mike, and the guy sitting next to Paul is Giles Martin, who is George Martin's son, who is now a producer for Paul, music producer. And George Martin was the producer who produced all the Beatles and then Pink Floyd, and he's just a genius. So it was really such an amazing collaborative time to be able to work with somebody like those two guys. It was amazing. The thing, though, I want you to understand is this probably sounds like, oh, yeah, having sex with stars. I'm not just naming stars because it's cool. I was very, very nervous about this. Number one, I'm a huge Beatles fan, so I thought, will I even be able to be in the same room with Paul and not just turn into a puddle on the floor? And I thought, before I went to meet with him, I thought, if he's interested, I'm going to have to get to the point where he trusts me creatively. And number two, that I actually believe that what we do together is better than what I would have done alone, just like I said before. And I know that probably sounds like some hubris, but it's like really possible that the chemistry just doesn't work. And you have to be aware if the chemistry's not working, you have to go away from it. So I went back to the marketing guys and I said, look, I need to make sure Paul trusts me, and I need to make sure that I believe that what we do together is going to be really good. And they're like, how long will that take? And so there it is again. There's that meeting of the two worlds. How long will that take? Well, if I knew how long that would take, right? So it took a while. So here we go. None of us is as smart as all of us. And that's a Japanese proverb. I want you to remember that from Collaboration. But of course, we've all been in some really bad meetings. None of us is dumb as all of us. So for every positive thing I say, I have another, negative thing that shoots it down. So I'm going to go really quickly through something that I call the good hand of leadership. So there it is. You can remember there's 5 points in this. So instead of 3, it's 5. And this is what I think should happen in any good creative collaboration. Somebody still needs to take the lead. It doesn't necessarily have to be you, but if you are taking the lead, I think it's important to drive these things. The first thing is, whatever the concept you're trying to come up with, I think it's important to say, here's what I think. And then as quickly as possible, you give just your little, I'm not really sure, but I think this might be a good direction. But what do you think? And then however many people are in the room, the third thing you want to do right away is let's talk. So you want to get to the point where people all can share, and they already know sort of what you're thinking, so they're not worried you're going to just steal their idea, which, by the way, I've been in a lot of creative meetings where the leader doesn't say what he thinks, and then I'll say, well, wouldn't it be cool if blah, 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 and then later on he takes credit for it. So that's why I think it's good to sort of break the ice by saying, this is what I think, but let's talk about it. And I want to know what everybody else thinks. And then you get to consensus, okay? At this point, I think it's the leader's job to say, okay, let's summarize. Here's what we all think. Here's what we think. And when you get to here's what we think, it better be better. It better be better than here's what I think. At this point, you need to identify that this is actually something that's way cooler than any of you would have done as an individual. And then you need to drive through to action. Let's do it. So if you just look at this on the face of it, it's I and you, and then it's from then on it's we. And that is so important. But as a leader, you have to get to the point where people leave that room and know what their job is. And then you just keep doing that until you ship. Loop it till ship. The next day, all right, here's what I think about what we were doing. What do you think? Let's talk about it. And you just keep doing that over and over. Even after you ship, I agree, postmortems in game magazines are not very, well, it's like looking at an accident. I mean, it's morbidly interesting. But what I think internal postmortems, which I've almost never had a really good, solid postmortem, but I think it should be run like this. Here's what I think about what we shipped. What do you think? Let's talk about it. So even after you ship, you should be evaluating what you did creatively. And then, of course, there's the hand of leadership that's bad, which is the hand of leadership that's not good, which is do what I want or you're fired. That's if you're working in a place that says, here's what I think, go do it. You should leave that place as soon as possible. There will be no collaboration. You will not really be able to be creative in that situation. All right, and here's another thing. If you absorb the hand of leadership, great. If you don't worry about it. I have a whole other metaphor I'm going to just spring on you right now. Be nice to the goose. Notice? See what it's doing? By the way, this is my PowerPoint skills. What do you think? Pretty good? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So just to remind you what the original story is, there was a goose. It's a normal goose. By the way, not a golden goose. When people say the golden goose, it's wrong. It's just a regular goose. There's nothing about this goose that makes you know he's going to lay a golden egg. But this goose did lay a golden egg for the farmer and his wife, and they were really thrilled. They got the golden egg, and they cashed it in, and then they got greedy, of course, and they decided, let's carve into this goose and grab all the other golden eggs that are already in there. And they opened up the goose. There was no other golden eggs, and this is what ended up happening. See, I probably should have done a cartoon goose, because this really brings everybody down, doesn't it? That's a real deal. Okay, sorry. So the moral of the story is all this. Greed destroys the source of good. Think before you act. Those who want too much lose everything. Killing the goose has become a metaphor for any short-sighted action that may bring an immediate reward, but will ultimately prove disastrous. Yeah, that's so obvious. Really? Is that the best moral of the story? No, it is not. Here's the best one. This is my moral. Don't mistake the golden egg for the goose that laid it. So this happens way more often than you might think. And here's how you can tell the goose from the golden egg. The goose is organic. It's alive. See, I'm telling you, my PowerPoint skills are really primo. The golden egg is inorganic, never lived, doesn't have a chance of ever living. So if you end up being nice to the golden egg, it's sort of like turtle wax. You have that over here, right? Okay. It's sort of like it's like polishing a golden egg and expecting that you're going to get more golden eggs by doing that. And really all you get is a really shiny egg. You don't get more golden eggs. And I'm going to keep stretching this metaphor until you go nuts. Corporations, which are filled with the exploiter types, who I still love because like none of us this wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for the business types and the corporations. But that's mutual, back and forth. But corporations tend to mistake the egg for the goose. And when they do that, they give us this. Planet for the Battle of the Apes. Did you... this is actually probably a bad example because the original Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston wasn't all that great, but it was pretty good. But of course, they started immediately, the corporations were like, well, yeah, this is successful. Let's just do this over and over and over. And every single movie from that point on was worse. Just went downhill. They didn't hire the original people who wrote it and created it. Charlton Heston never showed up again. It just went down until it turned into this thing, which was just horrible. If you've ever seen it, it's just ridiculously horrible. But corporations do that all the time. They just beat franchises to death. And I don't know any examples that I can give off the top of my head. So the reason it's so obvious that no one actually that killing the golden goose is like, well, of course no one wants to kill the goose. That's just so obvious. But people don't want to kill the goose. But I'm telling you, they don't have a problem kicking it in the stomach. And a goose that's been kicked in the stomach doesn't want to lay any more eggs. It doesn't want to get out of bed. So before I go too much further down this goose thing, I was telling this story one night to some corporate executives, which I have to have dinner with every once in a while, which is great. Some of my best friends are corporate execs. I was actually a corporate executive until about a month ago. Wait, is that funny? Really? Come on. So I was telling it to this guy who was sitting there, and, I was pontificating about the goose and the golden egg. And he says, yeah, Marty, that's a really good story. I like that. But sometimes there's nothing like a good foie gras. So just even right now, I said that, I still get a chill up my spine. Because when he looked me in the eyes and said that, and I'm like, oh, whoa, geez. So here's the thing. If you don't ship and make money, there are people who will eat your liver. So just remember that. And that could help you stay creative, by the way. It's just a thought. So all right, let's get back to the goose one more time. Geese look the same. All geese look the same. They're annoying. So the most important thing is pay attention to the eggs they lay. All right? So if they lay a golden egg, that's the goose you want to be nice to. I mean, you can be nice to everybody, but I mean, seriously, if you want to have a good creative collaboration, find people who are doing something that's great. And by the way, being nice to the goose is easy. It doesn't take much. I looked this up on the internet, so I know how to take care of a goose now. All you need to do is build a little place for them, like a lean-to, place to get out of the rain. They're not super smart, but they'll get out of the rain. And they're cheap to take care of. They eat grass. I mean, how easy is that? So it's sort of like feeding developers pizza. I don't know if there's a connection there, but let's pretend there is. So you're probably saying to yourself, wait a minute, if geese that lay golden eggs are so special, is nice? Is that all you need to be, is nice? You're probably asking me, that can't be everything. You should be nurturing and mentoring and pampering and loving the goose, right? Because they're making golden eggs. And I say, no, that's not true. Just be nice, because it's just a little bit better than being neutral. Just be a little bit nice, and you're shocked at how good the returns are on that. But what we end up doing is we're mean. And we don't kill, we just are mean. And each of us can be mean, and we're usually mean to our own inner goose. Inner goose, remember that one, right? Okay. Your inner muse. I call it my inner goose because I decided to do that. But how many times have you had a little spark of an idea and then you're like, oh, that's dumb? I've probably done it a lot more because I have a lot of really dumb ideas. But how many times are you in a room or somebody comes to you and says, hey, I was thinking blah, blah, blah. And you're like, I don't know. Yeah, that doesn't do anything for me. Give people a chance. I was talking to Paul about this, Sir Paul. And he was, and I think he said this on a documentary someplace too. I mixed that up. Things he actually said to me personally and then documentaries. This is all just him talking to me. Whatever. But he said that he remembers this day where he just had this little idea called Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club's Band, and he wrote it on a napkin, and he didn't know what it meant. He was like, this is just kind of fun. Fun words, a fun little idea. That's a little thing that they could do. He brought it to the rest of the guys in the band, and they were like, yeah, that's cool, let's do that. That was pretty good, okay. So don't just snuff little ideas out. Don't be mean to those little sparks of ideas, because every really cool thing started as a tiny spark of an idea. And if you, it's gone forever. But it's really hard to put out a bonfire. And if you just help that creative spark that's inside of you, if you just nurture it, if you're just not mean to it, something great can happen. So each of us can be mean, but corporations are almost always mean to creative people. And that's because, well, maybe I don't know for sure why this is, but I think corporations believe that creative people are a necessary evil, and they're replaceable. So they have positions that everybody could be replaced. So these are what people look like, just in case you didn't know. These are the people. People are the important part of this equation. Over there, the creative process. If there was actually a chart that you could put on your wall and duplicate the creative process, corporate execs would just love that, because then they would never actually have to deal with people. And so anyway, speaking of people, Sir Paul, one of the nicest guys I know, and I'm going to hurry this up a little bit, but I just want you guys to know that, like, here's a guy that at age 71 finally got control of the songs that he wrote 56 years earlier. He spent most of his entire adult life without control of the music that he wrote when he was in the Beatles. And one of the guys, not just the original corporation that bought his songs, but even Michael Jackson kind of messed with Paul, because Michael Jackson bought the catalog of Paul's music in '85, and he and Michael were friends, and Paul said, "Hey, Michael, maybe we could renegotiate the deal." That was pretty good. And Michael said, "Oh, sorry, Paul, it's just business." And then there's John Fogerty, who's Creedence Clearwater Revival. He lost control of all of his music for years and years, and he was so ticked about it that he didn't do anything until in the mid-'80s he made a comeback. I mean, I think he's just one of the most genius composers of songs ever, and he's just a great musician. It was so bad that the corporation that owned his stuff actually sued him for plagiarizing himself. You know this story? Yeah. They actually sued him for plagiarizing himself. Like, how can there even be a world where that can happen? So he went to court and defended the lawsuit and won. Most people don't remember that he won. You cannot be sued for plagiarizing yourself. He did that. But it cost him over $1 million to defend himself, and the judge said, "Yeah, but it wasn't a frivolous lawsuit, so you don't get that money back that you spent defending yourself and winning." And it took him almost 10 years, and he went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and he finally got the money back, like in the mid-'90s, for defending himself, for plagiarizing himself, which, by the way, he didn't plagiarize himself. I have a third example here, too, and this is much more contemporary. I think the kids are listening to this guy. See, that just shows you, wow, I'm just really old. So I'll get through this pretty quick. You know that he also had problems with the corporation, and that's why he did this. He says, "The first step I have taken toward the ultimate goal of emancipation from the chains that bind me to the corporation was to change my name to the love symbol." I think he even made the love symbol up. I think that's his own invention. So Prince was the name that my mother gave me at birth. The corporations took the name, trademarked it, and used it as the main marketing tool to promote all of the music that I wrote. The company owns the name Prince and all related music marketed under Prince. I became merely a pawn used to produce more money for the corporation. So this is sort of interesting to me, and of course I'm only using musicians for this example because that's what I do. I'm a musician. But it happens across the board with everything. And as a creative person, what I would say is, and this is hard, you're going to make mistakes, but do your best to learn the best kind of deals you can make for the stuff that you invent. Because at the end of the day, we all remember these guys. We don't remember the corporations. We don't credit the corporations with writing the songs. So at the end of the day, you're the one who, you give away your music, you give away your art, you sell it, it's still yours. You still own it in the spiritual sense. And I just am encouraging everybody to own at least a piece of it, because then that actually helps you be more creative. All right, so I'm going to give you a little hint of some things to come. This is a project that I was really excited to be able to work on, and it was something that I was able to do, and it was a thing that allowed me to stay creative in the midst of corporate culture and working for publishers and everything else. Somebody came to me and said, "Hey, Marty, you usually wait to the last minute to do music." And I'm like, well, okay, yes, I do. But that's usually because I want to write music for an encounter. I want to write music for a story. I want to write music for, a trailer. I want to write music for something that I see. And then they said, well, what if you write music ahead of time? What if you do music all ahead of time? And I said, well, let me think about that. And I came up with this idea that's really an old idea, which is music for the sake of music. There's music that tells its own story, and music that's to be listened to because it's hopefully worth listening to. And I wrote a suite of 8 pieces, and Mike Salvatore, my partner, helped me with it, and we had a huge crew. Paul McCartney contributed great stuff to it. We did this whole thing at Abbey Road, 104-piece orchestra, 44-voice choir, a boys' choir. It was like the pinnacle of my own personal journey of doing music. And we did it the old-fashioned way. We did it in a studio with no click track, with a conductor that was just listening. All the musicians were playing together at the same time, which probably to most of you maybe doesn't sound unusual, but believe it or not, nobody does it that way anymore. And it was really, really a wonderful experience just to have real music that was performed and recorded. So I'd like to play, I'm going to play 5 snippets from this, from Music of the Spheres. And this is a work that will be released according to the plans, which are not in my hands, sometime in August. So hopefully this will be available soon. So what I'd like to do is, and I'm going to ask you to do this, and I'm sure most of the people in this room are very visual people. You guys work in the games industry, and most people are extremely visual. So you're looking at me, you're looking at a screen, you're used to hearing music that's accompanying something else. And what I'd like to do is bring the lights down and have you just close your eyes. And if the lights are down, maybe you won't be as embarrassed about closing your eyes. And close your eyes and listen to the snippets of music. It's 5 examples. And each one, I hope, tells you a different story. So just listen to the music. Think about the pictures that it evokes in your head. Think about the story that the music might tell. Well, that's the end of my talk. I just want to leave you with 2 thoughts in conclusion. If you take anything away from this talk, I would hope these would be the 2 thoughts. Be nice to the goose within you, and be nice to the geese around you, and you will be creative. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thank you.